Chapter 15, The Attack. Amuro Ray? Lieutenant Cusco Al was so shocked when she heard the name that she repeated it out loud. That's right, Chalia Bull said, looking at her curiously. We have information that he's the same pilot who destroyed the first Elmeth model, and that he's headed in our direction. Cusco suddenly felt naked, embarrassed before Chalia, but she feebly tried to respond to his unvoiced questions. I've met him before, she confessed hesitatingly. On Side 6, I never realized he was capable of anything like that. He seemed so young. The instant she had heard Amuro's name, a clear image had popped into her mind. He was waiting for her in front of the Flanagan Agency with the nervous look of a youth with more on his mind than just a platonic meeting. And there was something she had found rather charming about that, so much so that she probably would have gone along with whatever he suggested. After all, she had helped rescue him when he had drifted near the Cassetta III in his escape pod, and she had even helped him destroy it later. It wasn't as if they were total strangers. She had intuitively liked him, and that made her feel good. Just as she had enjoyed the new type aspect of his character, so too had she enjoyed the idea of getting to know him more intimately. It had been a mistake not to bring the escape capsule back to the Flanagan Agency for a thorough investigation, but she knew the Federation had no weapon system that could compare to the Psychomu, and following that logic, she didn't see how the capsule could have been all that important. It was only one part of the new mobile suit. Besides, she liked Amuro. She turned and asked her commander, Shar Aznable, "Did you have a chance to see how developed he was as a new type?" "No," he answered, fidgeting with the collar on his pilot suit. "But I can tell you this, during the attack on LH, we're almost positive your Elmeth was hit by a blast from Amuro Ray's Gundam." Cusco Al couldn't help muttering to herself, "I don't like the idea of Amuro Ray in the Gundam. She was a woman with strong likes and dislikes." But it had never occurred to her that she might develop strong feelings for an officer in the Federation forces, especially since he had reddish hair. That was normally enough to make her want to laugh. But there was something about the way he had regained consciousness on the Cassetta III and instinctively dealt with the crew in such a cautious manner, something about the way he had been so curious about his environment. More than anything else, it was the realization that he was a sensitive person that first had made her like him. Then, when she had learned that he was smart, the sort who did what he said he would do, and had enormous strength of character, her positive first impression had escalated to another level. Federation troops might have burned her parents to death, but Amuro Ray was different, so she would forgive him for being with the enemy. That was the way her femininity asserted itself. Perhaps, she thought, I can even contact him through the Psychomu interface and let him know that I'm piloting the Elmeth. What Cusco Al did not know was that her naive sentimentality would be first swallowed and then crushed by the overwhelming reality of war. When the 127th Autonomous reached Area 365, it was observed by Zeon scouts from both Solomon and Abawa Ku as the most advanced exposed unit in the Federation Armada. On Solomon, Dozel Zabi told his men, "Ignore it, it's just a feint. Revel bypassed us to take Granada before, so now he's coming to get us. Get our forces out in position and keep them together." After the fight on Texas, he commented to his staff, "Caecilia will suspect we have our own new type core. It doesn't matter if the Pegasus II is really manned by true new types or not. The important thing is that she believed the 127th is a true new type unit." "Do you believe it, sir?" an aide asked. "It depends on their performance in battles to come," he replied. At this point, they looked pretty good. General Revel personally commanded the main Federation fleet centered on his flagship, the Drog, and the carrier Trafalgar. Yet his fleet was only part of a giant armada of over 320 Federation ships. After leaving the moon, the armada had appeared positioned to strike Abawa Ku directly, but in actual fact neither the Zeon forces nor the crews of the Federation ships themselves knew where they would finally converge. For the armada was dispersed not just along a single plane, but within a three-dimensional spherical area over 10,000 kilometers in diameter, nearly the same size as the planet Earth. In this vast space, 320 ships were like floating specks of dust in a cavernous hall, so dispersed that they presented little immediate military threat. But when collected together at their final rendezvous point, they would constitute an awesome destructive force. Mankind was standing on the brink of yet another bloody power struggle. A single red light suddenly winked on the ceiling display over the Pegasus 2 bridge, and Ensign Mark Cran yelled, "Enemy ship sighted." The order immediately went out. Launch Tomahawk Squadron. The 12 Cosmo fighters under Lieutenant Commander McVeary's command were released from their moorings and floated off the Pegasus to second upper deck. With verniers deployed on a wing-like design, they resembled fat spears. Referred to as fighters, they had far greater firepower than did old-style heavy bombers. The first Zeon force encountered was not a new type unit but a special task force of 3 Musai-class cruisers from Solomon, carrying a total of 6 Zakus. 12 rockets streaked from the cruisers toward the Pegasus to second, then 5 of the Zakus launched. On the Pegasus, Bright issued a series of commands. They've penetrated the second combat line. Ready main cannon. Missile elevation 0.3 degrees. Launch 9, 2 volleys. From 12 missile tubes on either leg of the ship's front section, 2 volleys of 9 missiles each instantly streaked forth, leaving a trail of light among the stars. Initiate evasive action. B formation. B formation, Mirai yelled in response, flicking a switch on the panel in front of her, putting the ship on autopilot. If she had to maneuver quickly to evade an incoming missile or an attacking suit, she could manually override auto. But as soon as the maneuver ended, the guidance system would default back to auto and thus keep the ship in formation. The warships following the Pegasus, the Cypress, and the Graydon began crisscrossing back and forth around her in an evasive maneuver, preparing for enemy missiles. Incoming at 12 o'clock, 2 minutes. From the bridge of the Pegasus to second, the crew suddenly spotted 2 bands of light from missiles streaking toward them, but in almost the same instant they exploded. A Federation suit had picked them off. "I think it was a Muro," Sayla said softly. Shutters immediately descended over all the windows on the bridge, but the crew members never lost their view, for the inside of the windows now functioned as a display monitor. "Second wave incoming," Mark Cran, the operator, called out in a tense voice as he spotted a dozen streaks of light from approaching missiles. "Ready ship guns," Bright barked. "Fire at will. 4 missiles. Raise vertical elevation 0.6 degrees. Launch 3 volleys of 12 missiles each." It was the sort of missile defense that was nearly futile in 3-dimensional space. The Pegasus's anti-missile missiles streaked forth in what looked like a single band of light, but some of them appeared to have launched too close together and collided with each other, for mushrooms of light appeared not too far from the ship. Luckily, the incoming missiles were no more successful. In telescopic mode, one of Bright's displays showed the 3 enemy ships among the stars, and he knew they were close enough for his main cannon. "Target in range. Fire main cannon." Brilliant beams of light far more dense than the earlier missiles suddenly belched forth from the Pegasus's 2 megaparticle cannons and pierced the blackness, stretching for what seemed like an eternity. They emitted sparks on their periphery, probably from contact with comet fragments or stardust, but neither appeared to hit the enemy. It had long been rumored in the Federation forces that Zeon's Musai-class cruisers were adept at evasion, and the difficulty the Pegasus had hitting them confirmed it. 20 seconds after the Pegasus's cannons fired, beams from the Zeon forces streaked back in retaliation, suggesting that they had a less sophisticated telescope mode on their gun sights and thus took longer to aim. "Tough luck about the lousy optics," Bright yelled at the Zeon ships on the display monitor in front of him. "Just try and hit us." And then it happened. One of the beams from the Pegasus struck the left Musai, and an enormous burst of light flared in the darkness. But the explosion did not appear to have been fatal. "Give the left one 2 more blasts," Bright barked. "McVeary's squadron will be there in 5 more seconds." He knew that from then on it would be too dangerous to support McVeary with either beam cannon or missiles. And he also knew that the enemy suits would soon be on top of the Pegasus II. It was critical that Amuro and his men destroy them before they could inflict any damage. In the distance, he spotted the telltale fatal mushroom of light from the left Musai. "One Musai-class cruiser destroyed, sir," Oscar yelled. "But I'm picking up what looks like a Zaku at 11 o'clock, 3 minutes." Bright prayed Amuro's unit would intercept the enemy suit. If the Zaku followed normal Zeon tactics, it would try to slip under the ship's defenses. One never knew what would happen in a combat situation, but he had faith in Amuro. The Pegasus II and the other 3 ships in the 127th Group continued to close in on the enemy. When it appeared that Lieutenant Commander McVeary had finally reached the Musai ships and commenced his attack, Bright could not help thinking, "I wish he had more than 12 fighters." No matter how seasoned a warrior McVeary might be, the odds against him were steep. Amuro and his men steadfastly approached the 5 enemy Zakus. "Give him hell." He yelled into his mic, knowing that with the Minovsky concentration they were encountering, it was probably his last radio transmission for a while. "And don't forget we're better than they are." Ensign Sarkis and Kriya had both been in combat before, but they had originally trained on Cosmo fighters, and the new GM suits were harder to handle. The GM's electronic 360-degree display system, for example, was nice, but initially unnerving to a pilot used to direct visual sightings through a fighter's plexiglass canopy. Then the Zakus arrived. Sarkis met the first one, which unfortunately had the colored antenna-like rod of a squad leader. He fired his beam rifle. The Zaku easily evaded it and closed in. Sarkis yelled in terror, but in the same instant, a beam pierced the Zaku, and it vanished in a ball of light. Amuro's Gundam had slipped up on Sarkis's right side. "Sarkis," Amuro barked into his mic, "don't just fly with inertia, move." Yes, sir," the GM pilot responded. Sarkis's GM was nimbler than a Cosmo fighter, and he tried to operate it as confidently as possible, flying in a zigzag pattern above the assumed line of combat. Then he heard Amuro's voice call out again, 10 o'clock, up 15 degrees. Sarkis looked up and spotted the glowing mono-eye of a Zaku. In rapid succession, several blasts creased his GM's armor. Cursing, panicking, he got the Zaku in his sights and fired a volley from his beam rifle. With a whoosh, one blast hit home. The Zaku began spewing beads of light from its back and then raised both hands as if clawing in desperation at the heavens. Then another beam hit home. The Zak's limbs disintegrated and the entire suit turned into a ball of light. Then he heard, "Sarkis, don't waste your energy." It was the scolding voice of his unit leader Amuro again. After Amuro, Sarkis, Kai, and Hayato had each made 1 kill, the entire mobile suit unit chased the remaining Zeon Zaku as it tried to flee back to its mothership. "Kriya," Amuro commanded, "I want you out in front." He wanted to present the ensign with an easy target and let him aim at the retreating Zaku, but the man somehow managed to bungle it and took 2 shots. By the time the unit caught up with McVeary's Tomahawk squadron, the last remaining Musai had been badly damaged but was still putting up fierce resistance. Since McVeary had already lost 4 of his fighters, Amuro's unit helped him out by slamming several beam blasts into the ship's prow and finishing her off. Only 13 minutes had elapsed between the moment of initial contact with the Zeon task force and its annihilation. In terms of firepower, the Pegasus II and its accompanying ships had a slight advantage over the Zeon squadron, but in reality the battle had been determined by the effective tactics employed. Not a single attacking Zaku had been able to penetrate the 127th's defense. Back in the briefing room of the Pegasus II, Amuro stated his opinion emphatically. "That was nothing. They haven't even arrived yet. And I don't mean Kycilia or Dawsle's regular forces. I mean Zeon's true new type unit." Lieutenant Commander McVeary was still preoccupied with the last battle and could not resist a dig at Amuro's mobile suit unit. "If you'd reached us earlier, Mr. Amuro," he caustically commented, "I wouldn't have lost 4 of my fighters." He knew that the criticism was not fair and that he was just saying it to let off steam. In reality, he had been amazed at the speed with which Amuro and his men had joined the fray. He had heard that mobile suit battles were essentially chase and be chased melees, but in the entire war he had never witnessed such a feat. 5 enemy Zakus had been unable to sink a single Federation ship and had instead been annihilated themselves. The 127th had achieved a phenomenal victory, but on a personal, emotional level, he could not ignore the fact that several of his own men had been lost. "Next time maybe we should form the rear guard," he joked lamely. He still had enormous pride in the vanguard role of his Cosmo fighter unit, and he was not ready for the answer he received. Amuro took his words literally. "If that's what you prefer," he said, "we can try it next time, sir." "Whoa, wait a minute, Sonny," McVeary answered in a quick about-face. "Let's be serious here. I'm a Tomahawk man. That's not funny." Reached. General Revel's flagship, the Drog, fired off a blue signal flare that was observed far off on the Federation's FS moonbase. FS then transmitted a coded laser message to each of the Federation fleets in the Armada. "Proceed at 3rd combat speed." Each unit commander thus finally was permitted to open the secret file that had been delivered on departure and learn the Armada's true target, Zeon's space fortress, Bawaku. Bright Noah, for his part, finally learned the 127th's true mission, to use all means available to destroy Zeon reinforcements from Solomon. He knew that the Solomon forces would not sit idly by during the 10 hours in which the dozen or more Federation fleets formed a virtual wall between Solomon and Bawaku, and that if the Armada were not careful, it would be constantly harassed from the rear by Solomon forces as it closed in on Bawaku. The 127th, at the highest elevation relative to the plane of the ecliptic, would act as a shield for the Armada, and it would be the first unit attacked. "Here we are," Bright grumbled from his captain's seat on the bridge. "The decoy, the bait, the sitting duck. If I understand this right, it looks like Revel's ships take on the main force from Bawaku, while we hold off everyone else from Solomon. But that at least means the Red Comet won't come after us, right?" Kai seemed relieved when he said it. "He's right, isn't he?" Amuro asked, glancing at Mirai. Mirai pondered a minute. "I don't think so. We've won enough skirmishes to attract attention from all over. We'll be targeted by both Solomon and Bawaku forces, but since we're too small a unit for them to waste a large fleet on, I'll bet the special unit led by the Red Comet will eventually come after us." Sayla, manning the communications console on the bridge, removed her headset to better hear the conversation taking place around her. Could her brother really be coming toward them? Mirai seemed to think so. She felt trapped in a web of fate. In her heart she knew he was on his way. On Vice Admiral Dozzel's flagship, the Gando, the communications experts quickly noted the increased activity of the Federation forces and the fact that they appeared to be converging around a single area in space. Don't they regard Solomon as a worthy enemy? Dozzel wondered out loud. He felt oddly slighted by General Revel, but when he heard the news that 3 of his Musai-class ships had just been destroyed in a fray with a Federation unit, he was enraged. "What?" he yelled. "They annihilated our cruisers in only 10 minutes? Yes, sir," a nervous junior officer replied. "One of our patrol ships in Field 550 sighted the explosions and went straight to the area, but it was too late. Our ships had already vanished, sir." "Even though they had Zakus protecting them?" "Yes, sir. 6 of them, sir." "Who says so?" After Dozzel barked out his orders, he reached out for his coffee tube and took a sip. "Just wait, Revel," he muttered. "I'll teach you a lesson you won't forget." On Bawaku, Kisilia Zabi couldn't help smiling when she heard of the change in the Federation movements. Technically speaking, she wasn't responsible for Bawaku. It was under her brother Giran Zabi's jurisdiction, and she was merely using it temporarily. "Giran should fly here and defend the place himself," she snapped. But could he arrive in time? It would still take several days before the system project could be completed. The real question was whether her own forces on Bawaku should move out to strike the Federation Armada, and if so, with her limited strength, How should she inflict maximum damage on them? There won't be time for us to try and wipe out the Federation units one by one, Sharaznable said. We should wait until they come closer and converge. Why do you say that? Cassilia asked, noting that his view was at odds with the strategy put forth by the Zeon General's staff. Because the forces coming at us aren't omnipotent. We should draw them in closer and then crush them right in front of a Baoaku, and I think Your Excellency's forces should lead the attack. If we try and hit their fleets individually, we might accidentally disperse them. That might gain time for the system project to be completed, but it would indirectly aid your brother, the Supreme Commander. I won't let him use this system. I'm going to show him what we can do without it. Your brother's an extremely ambitious man, Excellency. Remember, this is war. But I understand your wishes. I'll take my unit out to meet the enemy and hope Vice Admiral Dozel comes through to help us. Shar turned and started to exit Caecilia's office. He felt angry. He wanted to tell her that in order to survive politically, they should abandon a Baoaku and flee. But he did not. He knew she was obsessed with the idea of staying and destroying the new type unit on the Federation's White Base-class warship. Margaret Ring Blair was standing and waiting nervously for him outside Caecilia's office door. "Are you taking off?" she queried. "It looks that way," he said. "I think this is it. Take care of yourself, Margaret. Thank you, Commander." There were other secretaries and aides watching in the reception area, so he touched her elbow and gently motioned for her to accompany him outside. She immediately sensed his meaning and moved to open the door for him. Once outside, he turned to her. "At this point, Margaret," he said, "the most important thing is to survive. Don't do anything rash. It's better to be a coward in this business. Look out for yourself." The rounded shape of the space attack ship Madagascar lay at rest on the darkened flight deck of a Baoaku, ready for launch. The mobile suits and the Elmeth in Commander Charaznable's new type unit had already been loaded. "Well," Lieutenant Chaliabul said, turning to Shar and grinning, "where do we rendezvous with our Federation date? The kid is a crack mobile suit pilot, and there's a strong possibility he may kill us instead of the other way around." Kuzco was taken aback. She knew Chalia was right, but she had a competitive streak in her. She had been raised to ignore the differences between men and women, and she believed people should be judged on the basis of talent and ability, not gender. But war tended to wreak havoc with everything, and that was another reason she hated it. "It's not like you to be so sentimental, Kuzco," Chalia continued. "You, of all people, should have a healthy respect for new type abilities. After all, you're the one this Amuro Ray character nearly managed to vaporize earlier, right?" Shar and Chalia left for the Madagascar's bridge, and Lieutenant Cramble came over to console Kuzco. She tried to avoid him by climbing in the cockpit of the Elmeth, but he called out after her, "Don't take it to heart. Chalia's just being a little pompous. He's just trying to show himself off as a new type." "Thanks, Cramble. But don't worry, I'm okay." She didn't think much of Cramble, and she never could understand why he fancied himself a ladies' man. To her, he was just another oversexed male. As for herself, she knew she attracted men, but she was not going to exploit that. She believed she had a responsibility to improve whatever talents God had given her. She knew she had some, and she was proud of it. And Amuro Ray? His naivete clearly came from his youth. That she had liked him showed she was a woman, and as far as she was concerned, there was nothing wrong with that. She also liked the fact that he had been broad-minded enough to have been attracted to a woman like herself. But in battle, she knew that she would meet an entirely different Amuro Ray. That combat might drastically transform his otherwise innocent personality. This in turn allowed her to realize that Amuro indeed probably had been the one who had nearly killed her. And from there her own acute intellect quickly led her to a conclusion. "I liked you, Amuro. But I have to kill you." Shortly thereafter, the Madagascar took off from a Baoaku. supported by 2 Gattle fighter bomber squadrons. In the meantime, on the Federation side, the 127th Autonomous had detected a second enemy force approaching. It was no surprise. The officers on the bridge of the Pegasus II had known they would run into more and more resistance the closer they got to the heart of Zeon territory. "It's been only 6 hours since the last attack, right?" Amuro said. The shapes of 6 or 7 enemy ships had already been observed 25 degrees below the ship's starboard wing. "Know what I think?" Lieutenant Commander McVeary said. "I think there's finally been enough killing. When the whole campaign's over, the whole god-awful war's finally going to be over too." Then he laughed and added, "But this time my men and I'll form your vanguard again, Mr. Amuro," and hurried out of the room. Amuro glanced up at Bright in the captain's seat above him on the bridge. "Is McVeary becoming a philosopher or what, sir? Way here to kill us." "But Mirai," Amuro said, his anguished voice rising in volume. "I don't care if the skipper's joking. I think that sort of talk's an insult to all the people who've given their lives in the war. Don't you? We're not living in a video game world, are we? How many points to kill another human? 1, 2? How many points was Lala Sun worth?" Bright signaled Sayla. Quickly reading his meaning, she stood up from her seat in front of the communications console and walked over to Amuro. Taking him by the arm, she said, "Amuro, you've got to calm down." Their bodies swayed in the weightlessness, but they both reached out and grabbed a fixture and pushed against it. As they floated out the bridge exit, she said, "You don't really believe they're serious about people killing each other for such a crazy reason, do you? Just think. By building the space colonies, we created room for billions more people to live, and life on the colonies is now stabilized. History can't go backward." "I don't know, Sayla. There was a weird logic behind what Bright said. It's based on the idea that man's fundamentally rooted to the planet Earth and that his population should be tied to it too. But new types are supposed to transcend all that, right? They're not bound by archaic ways of thinking and don't need to kill each other because of it, right?" Amuro headed for the flight deck, and Sayla followed him. When they boarded the flight deck elevator, they were at last alone. She suddenly turned and kissed him. "Amuro," she whispered, "unless we somehow stop this war, new types will never really come into their own. You've got to fight in order to end it. If someone like you dies, the old ways of thinking are going to last forever. Listen, Sayla, do you think your father really believed what you're saying now? He never specifically told me this stuff, and I wouldn't have been old enough to really understand if he had. But I know our world's changing, Amuro." "I know. New types aren't espers. I know I'm just an ordinary human. If there's any difference between me and people on Earth, it's, how should I say it? It's that the light of the stars is just as important to me as the air is to them. For people to understand each other in a universe as vast as this one, we're going to need a lot more intuition and insight and a hell of a lot more patience. We need those qualities all the time, but in space they're critical, aren't they? But most people are still locked into old ways of thinking and don't understand that yet." Sayla suddenly looked at him, smiled, and said, "You know, Amuro Ray, I think you're just the man to teach them." He looked her in the eye and smiled too. "Sayla, pretty Sayla, thanks. Tell you what, I'll launch from the Pegasus and go fight today, not for some high ideal, but for you, to protect you. How's that?" She giggled. "Words like those make me glad I was born a woman, Amuro. They seem a little too romantic, but I'm not complaining. Go out and do your best, for me if you want. And when you come back, let's talk some more about what we can do." Saying, "Let me kiss you again," he bent his head and gently placed his lips on hers. The 2nd Zeon Task Force sent to destroy the 127th Autonomous consisted of 2 Chiba-class heavy cruisers, 4 Salamis-class regular cruisers, 3 Zakus, and 1 squadron of Jiko attack ships. Although the 127th was outclassed in numbers and strength, McVeary and Amuro's units lured the enemy into a defined combat zone and annihilated them. Incredibly, The entire action took less than 15 minutes. 2 of McVeary's Tomahawks were heavily damaged, but much to his relief, Hayato and Kriya managed to rescue the pilots with their mobile suits. In times like this, he later admitted, laughing loudly. I guess those damned robot arms come in pretty handy after all. And as for you, Mr. Amuro-Ray, well, let me congratulate you on the fine job you did training your men. From now on, lad, we'll work together like hand and glove. After returning to the Pegasus Bridge, Amuro saw Sayla. They winked and jokingly flashed the V for victory sign at each other. They did not know that with every victory, the 127th was attracting an ever more powerful enemy. We're dealing with some full-blown new types here, Char Aznable said, after demanding more speed from the Madagascar. They're steadily increasing their performance and level of aggression. With the Minovsky level rising and radio transmissions no longer practical, laser communications were the only means the Madagascar had left to track the Federation fleet movements, and even lasers required predicting in advance approximately where the target was going to be. It's going to be hard to find them, Char said, but we've got to. If we don't stop them, the Archduchy's entire line of defense will be compromised. I know you're right, sir, the Madagascar's captain said. But you don't really believe, he added with what sounded like a groan. It's the same unit that wiped out our 2 task forces, do you? Only one, sir. Corregidor. Does it cover a wide area? Now things get serious, he thought. He was both tense and exhilarated thinking about what his unit faced. Normally he just wanted to survive the war, but this time he knew he had more at stake. Later in the Madagascar's briefing room, Char privately addressed the mobile suit pilots in his unit. Times are changing, he began. I first began to believe in the new type theory because of the Gundam pilot, and I now know new types aren't just a mutant form of humanity, nor are they just a weapon. Let me confess to all of you right now, and to hell with my own personal goals in all of this. I think we're on the brink of a new type era, and because of that, it's important that none of you be killed. Understand? The Earth Federation has formed their own new type unit to use as a weapon against us. We will annihilate them. But beyond that, I want you all to refrain from senseless killing. Concentrate on destroying the weapons of war and not the people. Too many people have already been slaughtered, and we need to end the war, not prolong it. I want you all to go out there and fight bravely, but stay cool and keep your wits about you at all times. Kuzcoatl was moved by Char's last words. She vowed she would use whatever power she had to their fullest extent. That was simply the way she was. As the pilots all headed toward their mobile suits, she donned her helmet and thought to herself, Amuro, if I run into you, I'll have to kill you, because by the time you realize who I am, it'll be too late. You won't be able to stop fighting. It's too bad, but that's the way war is. She climbed into the Elmeth cockpit and frowned, for she knew her thoughts were only a means of covering up the growing nervousness she felt before combat. It was true that if it weren't for the war, she would never have met Amuro-Ray, but she had no time to think of that. With a growing sense of rage, all she could think of was that if it weren't for the war, she would never have been placed in such a wretched position. The Madagascar entered the Corregidor Shoal Zone, and while its Gattle fighter bombers took cover behind the huge rock fragments in the area, the 7 new Rick-Dom suits in Char's unit deployed themselves with the Elmeth in the lead. Char's red suit came up alongside Kuzco's Elmeth and plunged ahead together with it. Chalia Bull's Rick-Dom formed the rear guard. If the bit units remotely controlled by the Elmeth could just destroy the Federation Trojan horse, their work would be half over. Kuzco, Char called. Do you read me? Loud and clear, Commander, she answered. The enemy will direct cannon fire and missiles at us before we visually sight them. Don't just rely on your intuition to evade them at first. Follow me until you get the hang of things. Then, when we catch up with the warships, they're all yours. Chalia, myself, and the other Rick-Dom pilots will take care of the enemy's suits. Understood, sir, Kuzco answered.